So there are a lot of moves in the offseason that oftentimes fly under the radar. No one talks about it. And this is a team that I always thought was a dark horse Super Bowl contender, but now they're a legitimate Super Bowl contender, and it's all because of one move. And this story isn't going to be talked about. No talking heads are going to be talking about this underrated move. It isn't going to headline any stories. But the Indianapolis Colts just signed former Pro Bowl left tackle Eric Fisher to a 1-year, $9.4 million deal to eventually be the starting left tackle for the Indianapolis Colts. This is a guy who in 2013 was the number 1 overall pick in the draft, and he has started in 113 of the 117 possible games he could have started in the NFL or could have played in the NFL. Again, a former Pro Bowler. And what happened was he obviously tore his ACL, his Achilles rather, in the AFC Championship game against the Bills. So we know that's why the Chiefs released him. But the hope is that he will be ready to play in September. There's no official timeline according to the Colts, but the hope is that he will play in September and that he's hopefully will be healthy, right? Ryan Kelly, the All-Pro center, Quentin Nelson, the All-Pro guard. This is a stacked offensive line. Mark Lewinsky, and they have to replace Costanzo, who just retired, and this is the ultimate guy. One of my favorite movies is The Blind Side. The movie that's supposed to be based on a true character, Michael Orr, who played in the NFL for 8 years with primarily the Baltimore Ravens. Right, that movie. And Sandra Bullock plays the mom, and there's a scene where Michael Orr showing up to his first high school football practice, his first official high school football practice, and he doesn't know how to block. He doesn't know how to protect his quarterback or the running back. He has no idea. He's never played organized football before. He's just a huge guy. And Sandra Bullock, the mom, calls him over and recalls a moment in which Michael Orr and her son were in a car together, and they're involved in a car crash and a car accident, and his instinct kicked in, and his instinct led to him shielding off any of the blow from the kid, from the son. His instinct was to protect the son. And Sandra Bullock was basically emphasizing that point, that your job is to go out there and imagine that the quarterback, the running back, those are like your kids. And so once he does that, then he's extremely dominant the rest of the way, not only in those practices, but throughout that entire movie, throughout his entire high school, and then goes on to play college career. The reason I bring that up is I've never been a huge believer in Carson Wentz. I've never been a huge believer in Carson Wentz, but even I have to admit one thing. The guy was sacked 50 times last year, the second most times behind Russell Wilson, who was sacked 52 times, and Carson Wentz only played 12 games. So in 12 games, he was sacked the second most number of times in the NFL. It's hard to be successful that way. It's hard to win games. We saw with Patrick Mahomes in the Super Bowl. It's hard to win games when you are not protected. And the reality is, when you look back at Carson Wentz and the season in which he was the runaway favorite to win the NFL MVP, the year in which he tore his ACL, prior to that, he had a great offensive line. In fact, according to Pro Football Focus, the Eagles had the number 1 rated offensive line that season. Last year, what do you know with the Colts? They gave up the second fewest sacks in the NFL last year, tied for second with the Green Bay Packers with just giving up 21. Only the Pittsburgh Steelers gave up fewer sacks than the Indianapolis Colts last year. So to me, I like Chris Ballard, the GM, and of course, Frank Reich is who Carson Wentz had his most success with as the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia. But it was that offensive line that that helped fortify not only the entire offense, but the protection that was needed for Carson Wentz. And I've always been extremely bullish on the Indianapolis Colts. I've always loved their operation. I love their team. They've got a solid core of wide receivers, T.Y. Hilton, Michael Pittman Jr., Paris Campbell's coming back. He was hurt last year. Jack Doyle, a talented tight end. A great running back in Jonathan Taylor, rushed for 1,169 yards, the third most rushing yards in the NFL last year. Their defense is elite. DeForest Buckner, an all-pro defensive tackle. Darius Leonard, all-pro linebacker. Xavier Rhodes, a former Pro Bowl cornerback. And now they drafted Kwity Paye as a defensive tackle who's projected to start immediately. And he may just be the most talented defensive tackle that came out of the draft this year. I'm extremely bullish about this team, and I think that it's a move like this. Yes, Eric Fisher may not return until week 2, week 3, week 4 in the NFL season, but when he comes back, that will be a monster pickup. In addition, that really they got him fairly on the cheap. It's kind of one of those Jadeveon Clowney prove-it deals on a one-year contract. And I've always been really high on the Indianapolis Colts. I've always felt like they were one quarterback away. I thought they should have beaten, even with Phillip Rivers last year, I thought they should have beaten the Buffalo Bills last year. That's the truth. That's the reality. They were the better team last year, even in the wild card game. So, again, I have my reservations about Carson Wentz. I've always had those. But I am a believer in the Colts. I'm a believer in their culture. And I really like the direction that they're in. And I actually think that this is one of those under the radar offseason moves that will potentially result in a Super Bowl appearance. That's how highly I think of this move, and I think of the Indianapolis Colts.